you today. I welcome you today to a national call and webinar that NACo put together this week based on recent events. We're really looking to shore up our cyber defenses in the wake of all that's happening across the world, really. And it's a good opportunity for us to focus on some specifics when it comes to cybersecurity and to continue to raise the awareness. I want to go over a few housekeeping items. I would just ask that you all mute yourself, and you should have been admitted in a mute only mode. We definitely want to entertain questions. So be sure to put something in the chat if you want to speak. Just let Brittany know, and Brittany will be monitoring the chat for us. And if time allows, we'll call on you to ask the question. And if you don't mind renaming your name so we know what county you're coming from, that would be great as well. Like I said, we're very excited to have all of you here today. And we're fortunate to have a number of folks from the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center. They are funded by the Department of Homeland Security, work very closely with CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Analysis Center, or agency, excuse me. And there's so much that goes on between Department of Homeland Security, CISA, and MSISAC that sometimes they're viewed as one and the same. The information that we get from all three is definitely consistent, but some of the services that we have access to under the MSISAC don't necessarily come from Department of Homeland Security directly. So just want to clarify that. The messaging, everything you're going to hear today definitely is affirmation from the national call that was earlier this week. So Eugene Kipnis is with us, TJ Sayers, and Casey Cannon. And we have a lot of material to cover, and we want to be able to answer as many questions as possible. I just want to spend a couple minutes here at the beginning to talk about the evolving threat. What we had 10 years ago is nothing compared to what we're dealing with today. Ransomware was a little bit around, but not much. It has escalated for sure over the past 7-8 years. Of course, misinformation and disinformation is huge, and actually is a very big component of what we're seeing right now. And that disinformation is as important to be aware of and monitoring as is the threats that we're facing. We have all been experiencing different virus attacks. The Log4j was a couple months ago, or at the beginning of January. But we're seeing a lot of attacks, of course, coming from other countries. And the MSISAC is going to talk about that threat intelligence here in just a little bit. But I did add a new one, and you see that in the middle, quishing as we call it, because now there's viruses that are being spread through QR codes. So I hadn't seen that until recently, and just wanted to share that with you. The reality is that the landscape is so much broader. I talked about the threats we're facing, but how are they getting to us? And with the pandemic and the use of the rise of video, our smart devices, whether it's your watch or your phone or an iPad, the cloud, which we're encouraging everyone to move their assets to the cloud, because the security resources in those cloud offerings typically tend to be more reliant and 24/7 than what we can offer as counties. Of course, remote work has increased, and remote work isn't going to go away, and we're not going to go back to the way things were. It may taper up a little bit as we get back to normal, but underlying all of this is the fact that broadband is needed for the delivery of all of these items I just talked about. And securing the broadband is extremely important. And we also know that cyber insurance is becoming problematic for a lot of folks. And I kid you not, I just read before we started this webinar, one of our insurance companies out there, insurance brokers, was hit with an incident. They're saying it wasn't ransomware, but they're not immune from the cyber attacks. And I have this quote there that you can read when we send the PowerPoint out, but it is from the FBI. And it's interesting to watch what's happening as the Russian cyber criminals, they are going to target US critical infrastructure. If they haven't already, they're using world events to oftentimes spearhead what they're going to do next. So as I said, I don't want to spend a lot of time with some of my information because I know some of you may have seen a couple of these slides before, but the one I want to point out that really hit home to me and was shared at the NACo Legislative Conference, that if you're hit with ransomware and it's encrypting your data assets, there's a particular one that is out on there marketing itself saying, hey, we can encrypt in 4 minutes 100 gigabytes of data. And that is incredibly frightening when you think that sometimes the end user may not want to tell IT, hey, I think something's not going on here. It is important that we're expeditious. And right now, that any incident that comes before our help desk or to us directly as IT leadership, we need to investigate. And that is one of the messages that I heard on the call Tuesday. Don't hesitate at all to investigate even what seems to be a normal security incident, normal being a relative word. So as we get started here, I want to turn this over to the Cyber Threat Intelligence side of the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. TJ Sayers, who's the manager of the CTI at MSISAC, is going to share his screen. And he and Casey are going to give us a pretty good briefing on what's going on out there. So TJ, I'm going to turn it over to you. All right, TJ, we can see your
screen.
Great,
thanks, Rita. Good. All righty, let me go full screen here. All righty, thank you, Rita. Everybody, thank you very much for having us today. Casey and I are going to run you through just a real quick cyber threat intelligence update, specifically focused on the Russia and Ukraine situation on the ground. So we're going to try to tie kind of a little bit of the background, where we are today and what our assessments are moving forward, specifically for the SLTT space. So to begin, quick background, Russia started amassing troops along the Ukrainian border, also in Belarus along the Ukrainian border for several months. They started off with a lot of disinformation campaigns.
TJ, are you advancing your slides? Excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I am, yes, I'm on.
We only see the first slide.
Here, let me try to change it for you. I might stay in this view, maybe. Is
there
it
you
better
go.
Like that?
That's fine. Now we can see it. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. I'll stay in this view, and that'll be a little bit easier. All right. So as I was mentioning, Russia has been amassing troops along the Ukrainian border for several months. They started off with a lot of disinformation operations. So I'm sure many of you recall that Russia said they were pulling troops back. And seems like tensions were de-escalating a little bit, and that turned out not to be the case. They actually then subsequently after that, very shortly, invaded the two contested regions in Ukraine under, quote, peacekeeping operations. Right before this happened, they started trying to implant malware on the Ukrainian networks, specifically with wiping capabilities. And we've seen this a lot with Russia in the past in Ukraine space. We've seen them try to masquerade malware as ransomware to try to draw a connection to cyber criminal groups, and when in reality, it was nation-state sponsored wiping operations trying to cause disruptions and destruction to Ukrainian infrastructure. One really interesting point with this, right before they moved into Ukraine, is they were having talks with China, and that gets into the whole Chinese-Taiwan conflict, and Russia and China kind of having, backroom talks. It was interesting that they invaded right after the Olympics, and it's now coming out that basically Xi Jinping and Putin had somewhat of an agreement that he would wait until after the Beijing Olympics finished in order for him to invade Ukraine. And it was just the day after they invaded Ukraine that the Olympics had ended. So There's a lot of geopolitical implications to this, and the MSISAC does believe that China's watching this whole thing unfold very carefully to see what the international response is going to be and whether or not that's going to temper or embolden their moves in the Taiwanese space. So basically the response from the US and our allies were to begin sanctioning. So we sanctioned Nord Stream 2, the gas pipeline, and basically shut that down. There's been financial and technological sanctions put in place. We're going after the oligarchs and Putin, and we've even seen a bunch of airspace bans for EU countries around that area and specific spaces that Russia would have to leverage to get into the Ukrainian battle space. The one thing I will mention on the technology front that's been really interesting is the fact that a lot of private companies are withdrawing business from Russia. That's something that I don't think a lot of assessments predicted. It's not something that we would have anticipated, but major things like Intel and AMD no longer doing business with Russia. There's already a semiconductor shortage, so this is a huge impact to Russia in that space particularly. Initial responses to our intervention and EU intervention was Putin and Lavrov. Lavrov is the foreign minister in Russia. Basically gave some pretty pressing warnings, right? They said if you interfere, essentially you're going to face enormous consequences. And we haven't really seen major consequences so far based on what America has done and what the EU has done. But we're assessing that we may see this in the subsequent weeks as Russia's attention from Ukraine boils down a little bit and their resources are freed up to kind of focus on a more broader scale at some of the people who are supporting Ukraine. All right. So on a cyber-specific front, what have we seen? Just to start with a little bit of history, Killdisk and NotPetya. So these were both wipers that we saw several years ago. Specifically with Killdisk, it started around March of 2016. This was affecting energy sector in Ukraine. It was basically wiping those things and causing outages and stuff. NotPetya was a very interesting one because it was formerly a ransomware variant that was subsequently reworked into a wiper. And that's kind of what I alluded to earlier, is they tried to blur the lines between cyber criminal and nation state sponsored activity. That way there's plausible deniability. But the NotPetya was a ransomware variant that was modified to just be a wiper. So it would encrypt everything, but there was no key that was stored. There was no decryption keys or anything like that. It just basically wiped the networks and that was it. But it was masquerading to try to draw that blurry line between cyber criminals doing it and if it was actually Russia state-sponsored actors. We've seen several different malware recently, all three largely wipers, so Whispergate, Isaac Wiper, and Hermetic Wiper. These three really have come over the last 5 to 7 days. In particular, I believe it was Whispergate. Microsoft was one of the first to respond to this, so they saw some weird activity. They dissected the payload and found out that it was indeed a wiper. And really, it was within hours that Windows systems were updated to prevent this from executing and doing any more damage. So again, just showing how private companies are getting involved in this conflict immediately to try to protect Ukraine has been a really interesting development. And I don't think it's something that Russia had foreseen going into this. We've also seen a bunch of other things: distributed denial of service attacks, website defacements, and data dumps. Specifically, data dumps on Ukrainian citizens. So they've claimed to have scraped, tons and tons of information, and they're leaking that information from on Ukrainian citizens on dark web forums. So a lot of information operations, trying to psychologically degrade the Ukrainians to get them to surrender. That's largely the aim of those types of things. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Casey, and he's going to cover the remainder of the slides here.
Thank you, TJ. So as TJ mentioned, there hasn't been much notable cyber activity thus far, particularly in the SLTT domain. But, Russia's a known entity, and we know they have the capability, and historically have had the intent, and there is opportunity, certainly. Currently, the focus is primarily on Ukraine during the invasion. But if the U.S., escalates intervention, particularly in a security context, that could lead to more cyber attacks. The one exception we have seen in terms of threat activity is non-Russian Palestinian group known as Stormus. They targeted the Ukrainian Minister of Foreign Affairs, and now they're boasting a breach of a U.S. Entity today. Conti is one major cyber criminal group, and I know TJ was talking about those blurred lines between cyber threat groups and the Russian government. So Conti pledged support for the Russian government, and then shortly thereafter had all of its chat logs leaked publicly. It was an enormous leak, and as of last night, it looks as though Conti has actually wiped its servers. So an interesting development, and you know, speaks to some of the Ukrainian response so far, and a lot of the surprising success they've had in the information and technological domains. So if we were to see a Russian attack, what we'd likely see is, you know, them trying to hinder public support here in the United States for our efforts to block Russia. You know, they look for plausible deniability, as TJ mentioned, so not necessarily a clear connection between the Russian government and cyber criminal groups that they may be supporting or at least allowing. And then another challenge that they'll face is navigating U.S. potential escalations. If they hit critical infrastructure like utilities and hospitals, you know, retaliation could follow suit. So it is a dangerous game for them. We need not just look at the impact of U.S. measures against Russia, but Russia has to calculate as well, especially when they're severely burdened by current conflict. And I'll just point you to a quote above from Chris Krebs, former head of Scissor. He mentioned that as the sanctions continue to hit the Russian economy, you know, it may actually become an economic necessity for ransomware actors to bring additional revenue. And there's that economic impact as the sanctions kind of tighten on Russian entities. Next slide, please. So we put out a report last month in January, a short form analytic report, and it assessed with high confidence the Russian invasion. This was obviously before the invasion occurred, would put SLTTs at a heightened risk with specific impacts to critical infrastructure as well as election entities. Currently, we assess there's a high likelihood that Russia will retaliate against U.S. with cyber operations. Right now, we're just looking at economic impacts. Of course, I mentioned the previous slide, the prospect that there would be actual security involvement, whether it be something like a no-fly zone implemented, and that would also impact critical infrastructure, lead to a potential surge in cyber criminal activity as well as pro-Russian activism. Our current estimated timeline for major increases in U.S. SLTT activity is from 2 to 4 weeks from now, pending any significant escalatory U.S. actions I mentioned. So if the U.S. were to take any security escalatory actions, that timeline could get tightened. And then another factor, an indicator to look out for, is, as I mentioned in the previous slide, we're seeing the economic sanctions are having major impacts on the Russian economy. The ruble has crashed. And then, you know, Putin has to worry about pressure at home. It looks like they're undergoing some form of martial law. So all that's doing is tightening his timeline and potentially putting increased pressure for them to take action, whether it be, as Chris Krebs mentioned, you know, engaging the cyber criminal forces or more just retaliatory action to show, you know, that they're punching back at the West for these really crippling sanctions. Next slide, please. So given what we've mentioned so far, I'm going to provide here a list of resources. First is, you know, very strong resources. Scissor Shields Up, which provides, it's a page constantly maintained that provides guidance as well as detection and response input and, you know, insights on how to maximize your resilience in the event that, you know, we're seeing increased cyber criminal activity as a result of this conflict. And then, of course, us, the MSISAC, you know, we have a 24/7, 365 security operations center. We have an investigative response team in the event that you are hit by an incident. And between the two of them, they can both triage and assist with response. And then as well as our team, the cyber threat intelligence team, which puts out regular analysis. And if you have specific questions related to this conflict or anything related to your cyber infrastructure, your cyber risk, you can reach out to our team, and we're happy to provide contact information for that. Next slide, please. As far as technical recommendations go, we recommend you search your NetFlow, enable it to be searched, and I'll provide a link in the next slide to a gray noise page that updates with Russian IPs that have been targeting Ukraine to hopefully give you a little foreknowledge of some of the infrastructure you might be looking at in the event that targeting comes to the United States. We recommend you keep your software updated. CISA maintains a page of known exploited vulnerabilities, and that's really what we'd recommend you exploit as well, because it's not just about having the vulnerabilities, but it's also knowing that threat actors are targeting these vulnerabilities. Securing public-facing web applications is certainly key. As a general rule, enforcing the principle of least privilege throughout your networks, as well as implementing multi-factor authentication, and that's not just upon login, but it's also as privileges escalate into more credentialed and administrative roles, as well as ensuring your backups are updated and functional. Obviously, this is key, particularly with something like ransomware, is having offline, offsite backups that are made available in the event a threat actor gains access to your data and encrypts it.
Casey,
Next
before
slide,
you go
please.
on to the
Yep.
next slide, I think this is a really important slide for those listening in today or watching this afterwards through the recording, because, and I'll get into this in a few slides a little bit later, but what can counties be doing today? What should they be doing? And some of these things you may already be doing, but when was the last time you tested your backups, for example? And are they off-site in terms of where they're located? And if you have backups in the cloud, where's that location? And do you have another backup in addition to it? The other piece that you really, I want to hone in on is that the MFA is not an overnight implementation in some cases, in many cases. And some folks may say, well, I've got MFA on email. And as you just pointed out, that's not enough. When we have remote workers logging in and are going to another server, are they having to authenticate again? Those are the steps that, can be even addressed between now and that 2 to 4 weeks that you mentioned. So I just wanted to reiterate that, this slide is a really good slide to take a look at afterwards as well.
Thank you, Rita, and certainly to off of that, I just mentioned that as Rita mentioned, it's now with perhaps a little bit of a quiet period and the prospect that we are going to see activities, increased activity. This hopefully gives you an opportunity to review some of these things and hopefully implement them, or just ensure that your implementations are stood up. And next slide, please. So here's just a list of Russian Ukraine-centric resources. These are consistently updated from some of the more reputable cyber entities. Mandiant has a page that they're updating constantly. Cyware has a GitHub page, which is where you can find some additional indicators of compromise for threat hunting and running NetWell. There's a SANS resource center, as well as Unit 42, which helps kind of provide tools and tips as we provide here for preparing for the potential impact here. And depending on the subscriptions you have, organizations like CrowdStrike and Flashpoint have similar pages stood up right now. And I'll just mention, obviously, our team will continue to follow this very closely, remain updated, and put out comms as necessary, where we think it's really important that the SLTT community is tuned in for potential cyber impacts. But beyond that, that is all we have today, and we will stay on for questions afterwards. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you all today.
Hey, Rita, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. I was being mindful of turning my my sound off. So I'm going to share. Eugene, I'm not sure if you're sharing or not, but the next set of slides I'm going to share, and then we'll go into the MSISAC piece, some of the additional resources. So I just want to talk about a few things that NACo's put together that reinforce what both Casey and TJ have, mainly what Casey has shared. And last week we put out a new publication about really a cyber guide for county leadership. And we're going to be focusing on 5 areas this year, but the one that we put out last week is on cyber. And we talk about the importance of cyber, what the benefits are, but more importantly, this guide is designed for you as IT leadership to sit down with elected officials, county administrators, and other county lead stakeholders to explain in non-technical terms the importance of shoring up your cyber defenses, especially right now. What TJ and Casey just covered, I think, is great information to share with elected officials and others at the county level, because some of the activities that you need to perform may cost some money, and some others may just need the resources. And so we put together 10 questions for an elected official to come to you as an IT leader and ask. And as simple as, do we have a cybersecurity or board adopted information security program in place that covers cyber? The MFA question is here. Do we have a security incident plan? And more importantly, have we faced any cyber related issues in the past year or the past 6 months? And what did that show to the county that you needed to work on? And what are your priorities? Folks, I'm here to say that right now, this is an opportunity for you to get that, as I call it, the 3x5 card that you might have in your back pocket of the things that you want to do for security that you haven't had the budget to do it. And now with what's happening with the Ukraine-Russia situation, you're right, TJ, we are not, and Casey, we're not seeing anything right today that can be completely attributable to what's happening over there, but we know it's coming based on past experience. And so this is being proactive as opposed to being reactive, and being able to say to your elected official, we really need XYZ in place with our multi-factor authentication, and here's what it's going to cost. Can we get this in place in the next 2 weeks or in the next month? I know, like I said, some of these areas aren't going to happen overnight, but this is definitely an opportunity to have those conversations. I'm not going to read through all the 10 questions, but I do want to remind you all that the cyber insurance industry is, how do I want to say it? Still course correcting itself. I actually just went through a couple application forms myself for NACo, and the list of questions that you're having to answer and prove is a lot different than even a year ago. And anywhere an insurance company, a broker or insurance company can deny a claim, they're going to go back to that questionnaire. And if you answered it honestly, they may not even allow you to have coverage going forward, or the premium could double, triple, quadruple in some cases. So these are really good questions for you to be asking, in addition to some of the action items that you need to be focused on. And it's really, I hate to say it, but it's 10 to the basics. When was the last time you changed a set of passwords, whether it's a service account passwords or it's your tech admin accounts? Take a look at that. Hopefully you have a policy in place that's addressing that on a timely fashion, but please take a look at that. The 5 that I have in green are things that you can do today that you don't need additional funding for. You just need to stop, take a breath, and look to see where are we at. So changing the password and making sure you don't have any that haven't expired or that are set not to expire. Patching your system. I know we say this over and over. I don't want to say we're crying wolf, but there's so many attacks that happen. The Florida one with the water treatment facility is a great example where the patching wasn't being done. Older system, TeamViewer was involved. So just make sure your systems are patched, your critical systems. Monitoring your networks, up the game. Go look at your advanced threat protection in Office 365 and what you have set, and raise the bar a little bit. You might get a few more false positives by doing that. However, we know we're seeing already a rise in some of the malware I know there was a conversation on the tech exchange over the weekend and into this week about a particular malware attempt that if you're enrolled in the MDBR, the malicious domain blocking reporting that MSISAC has in place, it's getting blocked, but the number of attempts has risen significantly. So that leads me to joining MSISAC. In the chat, if you all, I know we have a good number of folks on today. It'd be great to know if you're a member of MSISAC. If you would just put in the chat, yes, I'm a member. That would be great. I think it's something that Eugene and I, we have a passion for it, and it's for a reason. We want to make sure you're getting information timely and that's helpful. And MSISAC is definitely providing that. And then the security incident plan. You don't have to wait for money to do this. There's a lot of templates out there. I'll share a little bit later, but put in writing, what is your response? What's your policy and what's your plan and your steps when there's a security incident? And if you have one, pull it out if you haven't looked at it in a couple weeks, and make sure you know who you're contacting. One of the things that was on the Tuesday call that really hit home for me was a reminder, know your field rep when it comes to the FBI, know your who to contact there, and as well as your MSISAC contact person, as well as a Department of Homeland or CISA contact. There's a number of contact names and numbers that in the emails that you should have in your security incident plan. The other areas are going to take a little bit more work, and a little bit, maybe they're out another 4 to 6 weeks. .gov is not necessarily an overnight process, but we know that it does raise your security defenses. Putting policies in place takes some time to review. If you're already doing end user training and testing, that's great. But if you don't have that in place, then you need to look at entering into some sort of third-party contract to do that. So those are all important. These are all basics now. These are not nice to haves. The last one I'll share is doing cyber attack simulations. We did one at the NACo legislative conference with an election scenario, and great feedback. It really helped folks think about, what should I be thinking about when we have elections coming up, and how do I need to make sure that my infrastructure is secure? So I share that with you. We will share these slides afterwards. The other document that you will have access to, if you don't already, is one that the county IT or the NACo IT Advisory Council put together last year and is still very relevant. It repeats some of what I just talked about, and it is on our NACo website available for you to review. But I share these as resources. That's part of what today is about, what to focus on and where to get help and resources. So what I want to do now is turn it over to Eugene, because he's got 3 specific areas that you could be involved in right now that's going to help strengthen your defenses. So Eugene, I'm going to stop sharing and now give you opportunity to share.
Thank you very much, Rita, and sorry for jumping the order there before. So I have a couple of services I just really wanted to highlight for you all. And I do have a couple of slides in here at the very end that I'm not going to be presenting on, but they're kind of a resource for you to get they're links for where you can go to get more questions answered, get more information on these services. We really wanted to hone in on ones that you could adopt in the near term or take advantage of in the near term, given the worries about future possible increasing frequency of cyber intrusions and attacks due to world events. And also, without the world events, cybersecurity wasn't getting any easier before this. So without any further ado, I'm going to dive right in. And the first one I'm going to cover is MDBR. Thank you. I think it was Blake put in a shout out for the MDBR service. It's malicious domain blocking and reporting. So I have a lot of slides on this, but I'm only going to briefly cover it because in a nutshell, it is one of the easiest things you can adopt. It is a security and intelligence-driven DNS service. What it does is it stops your organization's assets from being able to reach out to malicious domains and actually make connection. It's really easy to implement. It only takes a few minutes of time for most people. It can be implemented at the organizational level, or if you have people who have personal devices or remote devices that aren't necessarily managed centrally, it can also be implemented with those with some effort. What it really boils down to is this is going to limit a lot of your issues that you have related to malware, phishing, malicious links that are sent to you, malware that's already on the systems from beaconing out to malicious command and control. It's done in partnership with Akamai, and this is a really slick service because once you get it set up, it just works. And this is a quick diagram of how it actually works. Basically what happens is this interrupts that ability for your organization's assets to reach out to and make connections to malicious assets based on domains. So what happens is if, say, Bob from accounting or Joe from the environmental department, anybody in your organization just casually clicks a link that's malicious, as an example, it's going to come back when it reaches out to this DNS service as no listing exists. So it stops that in its tracks from actually making the connection. What this adds on to this as well, the R in this is adding reporting. You can get a summary. It comes out that will give you an overview of all the malicious connections that were attempted from your organization's interaction with this Akamai service. So, this is going to include information like the severity of the interaction with the malicious domain, what type of threat it is suspected to be or known to be. There's confidence level that's also reported. There's also a nice way for you to look at this. It's a boil down with the top domains that were blocked from making successful connections. And I wanted to stress this is really pretty slick to sign up and get set up for. This is how you kind of just walk through it. It's a step-by-step. You head to our website, you enter in your info, and what this is, it's a verification process that you're a member of the ISAC. Don't fret if you're not a member yet. It is free to do so, and I'm going to have that link later in this presentation. If you're a county organization, which I believe all of you are on this call, as it is NACo, you are able to get membership at no cost and no obligation. So you'll enter in, get your membership verification done. We'll ask for some information about your reporting contacts, your contact info, as well as some public IP information. We'll also want to know if you provide DNS resolution services or DNS services in general to other sub-organizations. So an example there is if you provide it for multiple departments or agencies or entities, we would love to hear about that because we like to track the sub-entity types. And then what happens is if whoever's like our primary ISAC member is just going to have to verify and approve that you get signed up for this. So just a casual user is not going to overnight be able to get you enrolled in this and change your DNS. We want to work with our primary cyber contact at the county that we have as a member. So once that's all done, we'll give you further information on getting set up. It's essentially going to be you pointing your DNS primary and secondary to this Akamai service. Once you get that set up and running, it just keeps going. It pays a great dividend, make the little investment up front to just get this service set to minimize your cyber attacks. And it doesn't do absolutely everything, but if you could remove, a large percentage of your headaches in one fell swoop without having to ever really touch that thing again, I think you'd all take us up on that offer. So you should.
Yeah, Eugene, before you go on to the next slide, I do want to elaborate. You mentioned about county members, any county can access this. Of course, it's any SLTT, but also we've got state associations that only provide services to the county governments, and they're eligible as well. So just wanted to call that out.
Oh, thank you. Absolutely. I didn't realize they were in the audience or this group as well. Yeah. If you are an association that supports SLTTs, you are also welcome to use all of our services. So please keep that in mind. You're eligible. This is for you too. Thank you, Rita.
Yeah, and we do have some state associations that provide the county email for counties throughout the state. So there's different types of programs. So, I wanted to draw that out. I think there are a few state association attendees that signed up at least to watch this and listen in.
Awesome. We'd love to have you on board. The better good that we can do with these programs, the better we feel about it. This is our mission, is to help support those who support SLTTs and the SLTTs themselves. So the other item I wanted to, I'm going to cheat a little bit here. This is not an MSISAC service. This is actually from DHS Scissor. And this one is this is like an opportunity for you to take the opportunity to look at your external footprint, look at your vulnerabilities, look for open ports, stuff that's out of date, everything. So what happens is you sign up for this program called Scissor Cyber Hygiene, and you get free vulnerability scanning. You'll also get reporting. You get kind of a slick report card that shows you, talks about the criticality levels and importance level of those vulnerabilities. And then you can kind of digest this and go through it. Rita and TJ and Casey, I think everybody on this call now, including me, is going to tell you how important patching is. So keep on top of patching, keep on top of vulnerabilities, and also keep on top of unnecessarily opened ports and services. So use this service, again, free. I have this at the end too in the reference slides. Go ahead and sign up by reaching out to this Scissor email address here. And what happens is you'll have to fill out some forms. The turnaround time is not instant. It's not like a get this done in one day necessarily. They will have to work with you to get you signed up, but take that time to make initial contact, get it started. The time is always now. And then you'll arm yourself with better information on how to get yourself understanding your vulnerabilities and then hopefully remediating. There's another key piece I want to draw your attention to before I move on, which is please do, if you can, elect to share your reports with the MS and EI ISAC. The reason we do this is what we're able to do is make a lot of correlation between all of our data sets. And if you're working with us already as a member and you elect to share this vulnerability information, it's just like the old web and port profilers we used to run. If you have been a member for a long time, where we kept track of key vulnerabilities and everything, it's really important for us because we can see the threats, the trends, and then this gives us the view into the vulnerabilities that we need to put assets and time and education towards for the community. So that helps us out an awful lot. So please.
Sorry, Eugene, I wanted to add here that while it's not immediate, it's not like a long drawn out multi-month process. Might be a few days or a week to get it set up. It's definitely something that can be started today and completed fairly quickly.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that I heard that at the outside of it is 2 weeks max. It's usually about a week at the average, or a couple days. So that's why I always say the time to start it is now, because that clock starts when you start sending that email. Get it started and get yourself enrolled. Now, this next one is an opportunity for you to use a platform to analyze suspicious URLs or files. So the importance here is, if your organization sees something that is suspicious or suspected to be malicious, if you want to take a quick eyes on and get an analytic done, the malicious code analysis platform, or MCAP, is another no-cost service that you can use to do that. It's a web browser-based instance. You log into your account. You can bring in a possibly suspicious or malicious document or executable, whatever, and it'll actually run an analysis and tell you a lot about that suspicious file. It'll tell you if it throws any indicators, matches any malicious file hashes that are on file with a bunch of the antivirus and other intelligence services that we run this through. And the other thing that it does that's really great, as of a couple of years ago, which has been a big hit, it will also analyze and try to resolve suspicious URLs. This service does all this stuff in a sandbox, so it's not on your machine. And so if you want to take a look at something, you're an administrator or you're an IT professional or a cyber professional, this gives you an analytical tool at no cost to do a first pass on it. Head to mcap@cisecurity.org, send them a message to get out that I want an account. Members are welcome to a couple of accounts. There's no limit there. Get your staff members as needed set up. And that feeds right into incident response. So let's say you did the initial look at the suspicious URL or file, you think that something went wrong, or you have a completely separate interaction where you have possibly been the victim of a cyber incident or malware outbreak, anything like that. We do have no-cost cyber incident response. We offer incident response through our computer incident response team, or CERT. The way to get a hold of them is to call the 24-hour security operations center. I love to be everybody's best friend and contact. I like working with the counties a lot, But in the case of an incident or anything, I regrettably try to work as close to 40 hours a week as possible. So this is truly 24 hours a day. When I say that, we mean snowstorm, Easter Sunday, they will actually be manning the lines. So feel free to reach out if you need to get incident assistance to that 24-hour 1-866-787-4722 line, or you can email soc@cisecurity.org. Get yourself some incident assistance. You can get malware analytics performed on your behalf. Digital forensics, services like that are available always at no cost to people who are eligible to use our services. And that includes those state-based associations. It includes those county governments, core departments, what have you. If it looks, smells, or acts like a public entity, we can work with it. What we also want to draw your attention to is Rita mentioned incident planning and incident response planning. You can write us into your incident response plan if you want. Put our number and our contact info in your hot list of numbers to call or emails to reach out to when you are remediating an incident or need assistance. Even if you don't end up following through and doing a full incident response engagement, you just want a sanity check or some assistance, please do reach out and get help if you need it. We are available there for you.
Eugene, I just want to mention that we had a tech exchange conversation last week, and it had to do with, you know, who do you contact when you have an incident? And I have to tell you, you actually rose above MSISAC, above cyber insurance carrier. It was a healthy discussion between, you know, some counties have to contact their cyber insurance carrier first thing because there's a certain process they have to follow through. Other counties don't have to do that. But in those counties who do, they still had MSISAC on the list. So keep in mind, there are other protocols that a county may have to follow when it comes to an incident. But this service right here for a number of smaller counties, especially, I think is invaluable. My only question to you to think about is, if you see an uptick in members reaching out and contacting you, does MSISAC have the capacity to handle all of those contacts, or would there be a delay? What have you seen with that?
That's a good question. I don't know about what like the anticipated turnaround times are like or anything like that right now off the top of my head. What I do know is we do have like a pretty comprehensively set up team that we've tried to scale with our membership. So, you know, we've got about 12 or 13,000 MSISAC members at this point. And so we do work as best as possible to support them. In the case where it's like an emergency or like a major event or issue, you know, I can imagine they're going to try and resource that as quickly as possible and as soon as possible. You know, the best thing I can say is though this is open to anyone who's not a member, if you sign up as a member, it gives us a good indication of the workload we need to be able to support. So that gives us a good metric and helps us get ready. Yeah, always feel free to reach out for whatever help you can get. If you and all your neighbors are having trouble, then it's probably a big, huge issue. And we definitely want to hear about it and try to lend our support. And I guess, you know, I wanted to just, you know, I have a couple of slides here these are the references that I mentioned. I just want to quickly draw your attention to the SOC number is always key. If you have any questions or need anything, always feel free to reach out. But I wanted to include the registration link here right at the bottom. There's a lot more services we offer that I did not cover today. One that I will draw your attention to really quickly is Rita mentioned the excellent simulation and cyber exercise that we participated in and set up at the NACo legislative conference. I was pleased to be a part of that and able to facilitate some tables. It's really great to see those discussions and have those exercises run. And the really great thing about those, this is my little soapbox speech, is you don't want to be thinking about this stuff for the first time when it hits you. And it's like the smallest thing, just knowing who to call. Have your Ghostbusters list. Who are you going to call first? Who are you going to call second, third? Like figure that out based on your needs and try to workshop that with your team. Try to make sure your plan works to an extent or makes sense. Tabletop exercising and simulation can really, really help that. And so we do offer 15-minute tabletops to allow you to consider things like that. Members are able to get that on the HISN network. And that's a platform we use for info sharing. So if you are a member of the ISAC and you're interested in those tabletop exercises, reach out to us and we'll get you access to those, get you pointed in the right direction, because that's invaluable. And we always recommend it. We drop a new one each month. made by SLTT government users, just like you all. And with that, I will leave things. This is my last slide. Feel free to share these out, Rita and Brittany, to the all the attendees. These are just the quick links to get you pointed in the right direction. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Eugene. And I will talk to the cyber simulations a little bit more here after I go through a couple other slides. We're doing pretty good with time. I just want to take a moment now and return to a few of our NACo resources around grant funding. I know that if you were in attendance at the NACo Legislative Conference, we shared this slide there as well, but I want to share it to all of you today. And it's important to know that the ARPA funding that every county received money under, the final rule does allow greater flexibility on what's called the lost revenue, and the modernization of cybersecurity, including hardware and software, can fall under that. In the beginning, a lot of counties were saying we don't have lost revenue. And the final rule that they put the limit of every county could have up to 10 million in lost revenue. So even small counties don't have to meet any paperwork requirements to document lost revenue. And I just would encourage you to revisit your ARPA funding, take a look at where you might be able to leverage some of that. And then we are keeping a close eye on the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that passed back in the December timeframe. And I just saw today, we had hoped to see the notice of funding opportunity out shortly from CISA, and that has not, and they're working with other agencies to get that out, but it's looking like it's going to be a few months more before we see that. They are still in the phase of identifying what the funding is going to look like, the request. What we do know is that that funding will go to the state first, but that 80% of it has to be distributed to local government. 25% needs to go to rural communities. And so important for you, if you don't know who your state CISO is, your state cybersecurity officer, if you don't know who they are, reach out to them today. Find out at the state level if they have started working on creating that cybersecurity plan, or if they are updating it, because local government is to be represented on that cybersecurity plan. So there's more information on our NACo website, which is the link there, but I did want to cover that because those are two funding areas that are either already available or going to be available relatively soon. And honestly, folks, the strong relationship with MSISAC and the Center for Internet Security is so important because there are free services there that I don't think everyone truly realizes are available. So the I have a couple more slides, but I just want to emphasize, what if you do nothing? What if we just stay the way we are? And I put this slide together. It's an eye catcher for sure, but the risk is too great. And this actually ties back to the 10 benefits of increased cybersecurity. If you don't do anything beyond what you're doing right now, your cyber insurance premiums are going to go up. You have greater chance of getting hit by an incident, whether it's a ransom incident or another type of virus, and your employees may not be able to work. Depending on what data is compromised, you may be facing fines. So not meant to scare folks, but really it's frightening to think what the world that we're in and what we need to do to ensure that keep safe our county data assets and really the brand of the county name. We want our residents to know that the county can be trusted. And something hit like this, where you're hit with a cyber attack, affects other services, election delivery, for example. If a resident can't trust the county because their data was compromised, they're going to be less willing to trust that the election process is being handled properly. That's just one example. So here's the other national resources that we've talked about already. There's a link in this PowerPoint for the FBI field offices. That one I want to make sure you have. Of course, reaching out to your National Guard, MSISAC, and then the CISA homepage. I do want to talk a little bit about our NACo Tech Exchange. We have 760 members, and we're very thankful that numbers growing. I know we probably added 10 more this week, and it's an ongoing daily conversation that happens on email, but we also have a community platform where you can share information. I know a number of you already on this call today are members, so thank you. The most important thing in joining is that you're connecting with other county IT leadership and information that NACo puts out. Announcements like this national call that was on Tuesday was in that announcement to the Tech Exchange. I couldn't put it on the NACo website to everybody because we were told not to share that beyond our county members. And so I had to go with our Tech Exchange list to send that out. So you will get information on there that you're not going to see on the NACo.org website. And then the cyber simulations, Brittany already posted the link to the next one. We adjusted the date a little bit because of spring breaks, but I did see some posts in the chat. This one's going to be focused on 911 systems and backup systems. So if you think, well, I don't have much control over the 911 system, invite that person to the table. It may be a separate IT that supports them, but you might share the infrastructure for the backup system. So we would encourage you to sign up. While it's a week-long activity, 4 times a year, it's 15 minutes to 2 hours a day, depending on what you put into it. There is a 45-minute webinar call every day, but then there's online homework, and you can actually dialogue with other attendees that are participating in that. And the daily conversations that we have through Zoom are just so helpful because you realize, okay, I may have a couple gaps here on my security incident plan. And so as Eugene said earlier, if you don't have one, there's lots of resources out there for templates that we have with our Tech Exchange. But if you have one, dust it off if it hasn't been looked at in a while, and know how you would implement it if you had some sort of cyber incident next week. Take a half hour and just read through that. And that these cyber simulations help do that. It's also a question on your insurance, your cyber insurance questionnaires now. And not only do you have a plan, are you doing any type of tests with the plan throughout the year? All right. I'm going to stop there. I just want to turn it over to see if there are any questions in the chat, or if anyone has any comments or any suggestions from you all as attendees, if there's anything you would like to offer. And we're here, like I said, we have a couple more minutes before it's 2 o'clock. Very happy to answer questions or provide additional information. Eugene, any last parting comments for the group?
None on my end, just other than take advantage of whatever you have that's on offer from NACo, from us, from all the partners that you have to lean on.
And good question here in the chat. We will provide the PowerPoint slides out to all of you that registered. We have your email addresses. We'll have to compress them in a PDF format and get those out to you. If it's still too large, we will upload them and send you the link. All right. Again, thank you all. And also, okay, there is a question. Karen, MSISAC folks, do you have assigned contacts or just continue to use the SOC? What do you have there, Eugene?
Oh, hey, Karen, I haven't seen Karen in a while. Thanks for the question. So for like everyday stuff, if you want to just learn more about services, or it's like a non-emergency or incident-based thing, if you've got an account manager, I'd recommend reaching out to them just to cut down on the noise to the SOC itself. All non-emergency stuff, go to your account manager or your contact. If you don't know who that is, feel free to reach out to us, and SOC can even get you pointed in the right direction. But for definitely incident response, digital forensics, things like that, we're very nice people, but we don't need to gum up the works and get in the middle between you and getting help.
And Eugene, I have you on speed dial. All right, and yes, we will provide a link to the recording. Appreciate the feedback as well. We really want to continue to provide relevant information. Please keep an eye on the national situation with Ukraine and Russia. I do want to add one thing real quick. It occurred to me as TJ was talking that with the sanctions that are being imposed, I think we're going to see even more delays in the supply chain than we have before. So not necessarily a cyber risk, but think about what you need to order and what equipment you need and where it's coming from. It may take even longer now. So did want to point that out. All right. Well, thank you all again. We're going to go ahead and close this national call out. And I will make sure that the PowerPoint and the link to the recording are shared out here in the next day. We'll get it out as quickly as possible. Thanks, TJ and Casey and Eugene. Always great to see you all. Take care, everyone.